What's going on, guys? Today I'm going to make a Belgian dark strong. It's supposed to be pretty close to like a Rochefort 8 clone, but I'm not going to put the expectations or raise the bar that high. Hopefully it just turns out like a really good Belgian dark strong. I'm going to put the recipe of everything that I put in here in a link below. So I got my strike water ready. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure out 5 gallons of my strike water. I've got it set at about 170. And then I'll go ahead and dough in it. Alright guys, so I got all my strike water in there and I'm ready to dough in, so here we go. It's mostly, like I said, I'll put the link below, but it's mostly, the base malt is Belgian pilsner malt. I'm going to talk more about what I think is going to make this beer a success. But in the meantime, I need to get all these dough balls broken up. So I'm not going to bore you with that, guys. So, real quick, I guess I could have showed you what my mashed tun false bottom looked like, but I think I've got a quick little video of what that looks like in one of my other videos. So we'll get all these dough balls out, and then I'll get back to what I was talking about. What's up, guys? Yesterday I finished that Belgian dark strong, and basically what I wanted to do is I wanted to touch on some of the things that are going to make this Belgian dark strong really good. Whenever you're making just a regular ale, you can kind of get away with different things like your yeast pitch rate and your fermentation temperature. You can let it get too hot. Your recipe doesn't necessarily need to be exactly perfect without having your off flavors. But whenever you're making Belgian beer using any of the Belgian yeasts, there's a couple things that need to be perfect, guys. And some of those are going to be, your recipe's got to be really close to being something that's going to be a success as far as your different percentages of your grains with your specialty malts, not overdoing that. But another thing that I wanted to talk about right now was your yeast count. And a lot of people probably are a little bit wondering about the yeast count. They don't know, do I need to make a starter? Don't I need to make a starter? Well, today, guys, I'm going to be able to explain to you, yes or no, do you need to make a starter? If you're making a beer and it's about a 1050 beer, original gravity, you don't need to make a starter if it's only about 5 gallons, whether it's going to be a White Labs vial or a wyeast smack pack. What if you're going to make a 1060 beer? Or what if you're going to make a 1080 beer? Or if you're going to make a barley wine? How are you supposed to know if you need 1 smack pack, 2 smack packs, 3 smack packs? How big of a starter you're going to make? Well, I know there's different websites on there like the Mr. Malty that are going to get you guys in the range of how much yeast you need to pitch. But basically what I wanted to do today, guys, is kind of break it down on yeast count and how I'm going to make this Belgian dark strong a success. So without further ado, let me kind of show you guys what I come up with for my yeast count. There is a formula that you're going to have to abide by. Your yeast cells, the equation is your yeast cells times your milliliters of wort times your degree of Plato. If you're going to make an ale, you're going to use either 750,000 or 1 million yeast cells. Multiply that by the milliliters inside of your wort. Multiply that by your degree of Plato. Don't worry, guys, I'm going to explain this thoroughly. Just so you know, there are 3,785 milliliters in a gallon of wort, or a gallon of water for that matter. So if you're doing a 3-gallon batch, multiply 3 times this number. Doing a 5-gallon batch like I did, do 5 times 3,785. That gives you this number, 18,927. Just so you guys know, if you're going to do a lager, you're not going to need 1 million or 750,000 yeast cells. You're going to need 1.5 million yeast cells, and that's the same as the rest of the equation is the same. So 1.5 million times your milliliters of wort times your degree of Plato. So you may be wondering, I got this first part down and the second part down. What about this degree of Plato? I've never heard of that before. Your Plato, basically it's some guy that his last name was Plato, right? And basically, you guys, it's the density of your wort, or the intensity, or what a better word would be, the volume of your gravity. Okay, so basically on Wikipedia it says it's a scale that expresses the density of the percentage of sucrose by weight. So guys, like I was saying, on that 1050 beer, or we could break it down to an even number of 1.048. How do we find the Plato of that? What you're going to need to do is get your 0.048 of your gravity and divide that by 4. That gives you 0.012. That 12 is your degree of Plato. So for 1.048 gravity, that equals 12 degree Plato. So my Belgian Dark Strong, guys, it came out at 1.090 in 5 gallons of wort. So I got my 0.09 and I divided that by 4. That gave me my degree of Plato right at 22.5, which is high, but if you're going to make a Belgian Dark Strong or any kind of strong ale, old ale, or a barley wine, your Plato is going to be in that range. So this is what I use, guys, to figure out if I need to make a yeast starter or how much yeast I needed. This is my equation for my beer. 1 million yeast cells times 18,927 times 22.5, which is my degree of Plato. That put me right at 425 billion yeast cells. Alright guys, so what I did was I purchased 2 smack packs of wyeast 1762. It's their Abbey Ale number 2. And then I made a 2-liter starter on a stirplate, and I pitched both of those smack packs into that 2-liter starter. I let that go for about 24 hours, and then I put it in the refrigerator after the fermentation was complete. I let all of the yeast settle down to the bottom of that starter. I decanted, or I poured off all of that liquid on top, and I left just enough of my wort and my yeast so that I can stir it up, put it back into suspension, so that I could pitch that yeast. So with this Belgian Dark Strong, I know the recipe's good. I know I use the right yeast. I know that my yeast count is correct. Let me show you guys what I think is also very important to make this Belgian Dark Strong a success, just like Rochefort 10. Alright guys, so I know I made that starter, and from doing the math I should have right around 400 billion yeast cells that I pitched this morning. Actually, I oxygenated and I pitched my yeast this morning, and right now what I wanted to show you is that other part that I think is extremely important on making not only any beer success, but if you're going to do this like a Dark Strong or a Belgian Dark Strong or barley wine or any kind of high gravity beer, this is a must. Don't make a beer that big if you don't have this equipment. A fermentation temperature, or fermentation chamber, guys. This is the Rainco dual controller. I set my thermostat at 66. I didn't pitch my yeast until my wort was sitting right at 65, and it also was my starter was sitting at 65, so there was no shock with my yeast. With this particular device, I can adjust the cooling and I can adjust the heating, all by just dialing in these numbers to let me know where I want my temperature to be at. Now, the beauty in making this Belgian or any kind of high gravity beer, you're going to want to keep your temperature on the low side so your yeast don't throw out a whole bunch of fusel alcohols that is not a pleasant flavor, guys. You'll ruin your beer. You won't be able to drink it. It'll have a lot of alcohol, but it won't taste good. It won't be a good alcohol. So you want to keep those yeast in check with the lower number so they don't get too active. After about 3 to 4 days of the temperature sitting about 65 degrees, you're going to want that thing to slowly start to ramp up while that yeast is still active. Take your temperature up to the high part of your yeast strain. So for 1762 wyeast, the high temperature range is right about 75. The last thing you'd want to do is start your temperature at 75 and pitch your yeast. You will make a fusel bomb. So after 3 or 4 days of sitting at 65, then I'm going to increase that thing to 77 for a couple of weeks, probably before I bottle this particular beer. So this temperature probe, let's follow where that thing goes. That temperature probe goes down into this thermal well. This is a piece of stainless steel tubing that's crimped at the very end and has a weld bead on it. They do sell those on the website morebeer.com. This particular tube, I just made this tube. I had the stainless steel tubing and I crimped the end, and I welded the bottom. No wort can come and find its way up through that stainless steel tubing, but my probe can go down into the wort and monitor the wort. So what's the beauty of having this raincoat device? Well, if you set your whole fermentation temperature, your temperature inside of your refrigerator or your fermentation chamber, it might be set at 65, but what about when your wort starts to vigorously ferment? This thing's going to go up from 65 all the way up to 70, even if the surrounding temperature is 65. So the beauty is to have this thermal well. So right when this thing hits 67 degrees, that Rainco dual controller bumps this thing on and says, no way, you're not going up to 70, stay at 65. And then when I'm ready for this to go up to 70, 75, then I will manually tell it to go up to 75. The beauty of that Rainco controller is I can control the cooling, but then I can also have control of the heating. And this is going to be the heat blanket that I use whenever I'm ready for this thing to really crank up. The beauty and also of increasing your temperature is you will have really good attenuation, especially if you oxygenated your beer. That's the stone that I used. That's the stone that I used. But also if your yeast count is good, just like we just now previously mentioned. So you got your yeast count good, you got your fermentation temperature perfect. You guys are pretty much in business to make an awesome beer. So those are my couple of tips, guys. If you guys like the video, click like. I appreciate all the comments, and cheers, guys. Here's to making great beer.